So I'd like you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit. I'll we'll go around this way, shall we?
Cav's looking at me.
Hello, Matt Carter.
Hello, Gav.
Hello,
yes,
this
so
is Matt Carter, DJ, producer.
You've done it for me.
Stuff.
You've done it for me. Yes, so I'm Matt. I'm Reading born and bred. I got into DJing and music, I think, when I was probably about sort of 17, 18, but properly, performing out places in little bars. I've been involved in running sort of events, club nights. I did a little Sunday afternoon thing, which was quite revolutionary back in about 1994, 95, called Slump, which is like a Sunday afternoon chill-out club that we ran at the Rising Sun Arts Institute, and then we moved it on to the Fez Club, which was then Alley Cats, which is now Secure, is it? I don't even know what the hell it is anymore. But yeah, and then I got involved in a lot more club sort of DJing oriented, more kind of dance floor stuff, and I, as an avid follower and regular of Checkpoint Charlie, I then became a resident DJ there, and then I ran it in Reading for probably about 6-7 years, I reckon, in total, and then slowly got more and more into the actual who's making this music. I want to get involved in the making of it, to have my own little record label, and then just sort of doing that really, and it got moved on more and more from there. Started DJing in London quite a bit, travelled around the world a wee bit, and here we are now. So that's kind of me really.
And we have, am I still on? Mr. Fogg.
Hello, so I'm Phil, otherwise known as Mr. Fogg. I suppose I started Mr. Fogg in about 2005, 2006, but I started making music, and sort of my relationship with music technology started when I was at school, and I had a little 4-track Fostex thing, which, for those of you who don't know, it used to be a clever system where you could use the two sides of a tape to make 4 tracks. You have stereo on one side, stereo on the other side, add them together, you get 4 tracks, which was kind of magic, and that was how I sort of discovered how I could record a guitar, then a vocal, then a bass, and a drum machine or whatever. I've sort of always been doing my own thing, I suppose. From then, I sort of ended up being a one-man band because of that. And I've made 2 albums now, one in 2010, one last year. And I suppose I record my stuff myself up to a point, to sort of 95% finished. But both albums have been mixed in quite glamorous studios compared to my bedroom, and and I use it live. I use it electronics live a lot as well.
Thank you very much. And we have Iain from Focusrite here as our
Thank
industry.
you. Yes, my name is Iain Horrocks, and where do I start? I was born on the 5th of June 1985. I started, really sort of fell in love at the age with music at about the age of 12, when I found the drums, and that's really when I got the bug for it, and I played a lot up until I was in bands and gigging in pubs from the age of sort of 12, 13, when your dad's your roadie kind of thing. It's quite cool, and then got in some sort of more sort of serious rock bands, original stuff. Started writing songs, because obviously if you're in a band you need songs. So picked up the guitar and taught myself guitar, and then through writing songs I wrote an album of original material. So playing the drums, piano, guitar and singing, recorded a solo album which is available on iTunes. It's called Inspiration Refresh. And then when I went off to uni to study music technology, I found DJing, and then that kind of took over a little bit. I was still drumming a lot throughout my course at uni, but really got the bug for DJing at that point, and it was a lot easier to walk around with a bag of records than it was with a drum kit. So got into that scene. I think when I finished uni, I worked at Sound Control, which is not even around anymore. So I was selling music tech gear and guitars and stuff. And then, so when Sound Control went bust, I kind of fell on my feet and got a job with Focusrite. And So really, since the age of 12, my whole life's been music. So nice to be in a room full of people who share the same passion. Really, that's a quick rundown of my musical history.
Good stuff. And Rob,
you could pretty much edit everything that they've said, and it would be the same as what I'm about to say. Basically, I started with a 4-track as well. I remember spending months and months and months saving up for it. I think it was £680 when I was 16 or 17. And then when I got that opened up a whole new world for me. And then I got an Atari ST to run as a sequencer, and that used to take floppy disks. That also took ages to save up for. I used to beg, borrow and steal synths, samplers, and just amassed equipment over many, many years, and took many years to learn how to use it. And all of that technology and all that power, any one of us now could download on our phone in a minute.
yeah.
So that's it kind of makes you angry and scared on one side, and then on the other side you think somebody's going to write an album on an iPhone soon and promote it and sell it
and release it.
Yeah. So, and also I'm in a band called Does It Offend You There? That's probably why I'm here. We've been lucky enough to sort of tour around the world, going to all sorts of interesting places like Japan and China, and touring with Block Party and Prodigy and Linkin Park and all that.
I suppose I should just introduce my relationship with music technology as well. I grew up in the 70s. I'm that old, and I remember the days before MIDI, and I remember drum machines coming out, and drum machines with MIDI and connecting them together with a synth, and wow, I've still got my original 606 from back in the day. Still got that. Interestingly, I lent my 4-track tape player to somebody about 10 years ago, and I saw it in Cash Converters recently, and I know it's mine because it's still in the same box that I lent it to. I might buy it back.
Got to do it.
Jazz camp. I play. I guess most of the work I've been doing the last few years has been in the world music realm. So I've got a band called Bloco Electro that's been dormant for a while. We toured a bit and played a few festivals. And that's live percussion. So it's all played live using Roland, Hansonic, and various other drum controllers, triggering sounds through battery. So it sounds kind of like your kind of club sounds coming out, but it's physically all played by drummers on stage, so it's all kind of clever programming, hopefully, in the background. And then also working with a band called Doll Foundation, which is sort of UK's foremost Punjabi drumming group, and they've toured all over the world playing world music festivals, and I tend to be the guy in charge of the laptop, making sure that everything's working in the background and the sound comes out and knows what to do when the drummer knocks it off the stage, which is why we use Firewire. And then leading music technology workshops, and I've been doing that for a long time, teaching people how to make music using technology. And my first workshop was while I was still at school, shortly after I bought a drum machine, and I had a Korg Poly 800, and I really wanted to show everyone the magic of the drums and the sequencer working together. And I've been doing that ever since. So I've got a few questions for you to start with, just to maybe start off some discussions, and then we'll take a break and we'll get some questions from everyone else here and see where that goes. I brought this along because this is one of my most favourite pieces of music technology, and I couldn't bear to part with it. It's my Soundmaster Latin percussion drum machine.
I thought it was a set of claves for a second.
I haven't owned this. I probably owned this for 15 years or so, and I was in a shop in London, and they had a pile of them in boxes, which they'd got from somewhere, and I've got to have one of those, and I love it. And I love it so much that it's actually the cover of my Bloco Electro album. Is this drum? Yeah. And if somebody wanted to borrow this, I would say, no, you can't borrow it. Sorry, you can sample it, but it won't leave my possession. And I'd like to know from you guys, what bit of kit would you not let out of your possession because it's sort of so precious to you? If indeed there is any. I'm sure there must be.
I'd probably say an SH-101 because it's so fragile, and it goes out of tune so easily. But when that baby sings, there is nothing else like it. No plug-in, no emulator, no nothing.
I'd agree with you on that because I lent mine to somebody and I never got it back.
So you know exactly what I'm talking
yeah.
about. There you go. Yeah.
Can you explain what some of these things are?
Sorry, yeah. Sorry.
This is a drum machine.
Yeah.
Does Latin percussion.
So you could do a little brief history, couldn't you? The so Roland were making loads, to what my knowledge was from their history, loads of electronic synthesizers, drum machines, keyboards that would accompany karaoke. Is that correct, as far as what you've picked up and what I've picked up from the history of it all?
I used to go to a pub in the 80s with a guy who used to play like Sweet Caroline.
Yeah.
And he had a TB-303 bass line and a 606,
Yeah.
and that was his accompaniment. He was using it for its correct purpose.
So they had the 101, the 202, the 303, and on it went. And I think the most fascinating story I've ever heard was talking about the Roland SH-303, which was a bassline machine. So the 101 is like a bassline synth, a very, very small keyboard, but you can hold it like a guitar, can't you? You can get an add-on for it, which makes it into more like a guitar. But the 303 was really used and abused by a guy called DJ Pierre from Chicago, and he picked it up, I think, from a charity shop. To just muck around with because he said it was an electrical box, it'd be fun to use and whatnot. But then his friend came round, I think it's a guy, I don't want to say Jesse Saunders, might be wrong, I'm not sure. But basically they were recording, mucking around with this little gizmo, and he started to turn the dials to places that they shouldn't go, and this weird Josh Wink, High State of Consciousness, you all know that sound, that's the 303. So I think then perhaps that excitement and that intrigue into all the Roland gear and loads of other synthesizers, became more so. But of course, Roland is just the tip of the iceberg, aren't they? I mean, they're probably the more commercial side of the synth. There was proper obscure companies making more. I'm not an expert on it, but yeah, the 303, amazing. But the 101 for me, still now, it's just sonically this bass tone that it gets. Nothing like you can ever really replicate, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure some people try.
I think
plugins,
squelchy is the right word for it.
Yeah, definitely.
All the sort of squelchy 90s techno had that sound.
Yeah, I think
I had a
you're right.
101 and I used to put it through my Marshall amp.
Yeah.
And just try and emulate.
See, that's another thing as well. You touched on it earlier, Rob, when you were saying about how you can just get it on an iPhone now. You can get all these synths and stuff. Go back, say, 15 years ago. If you knew someone that had like a 106 or, obscure piece of analog gear, it's like, bloody hell, where the hell have you got hold of that? How did you afford it? How have you used it? And not only that, okay, I've got this keyboard or you've got this little percussion instrument there. You now need a desk to plug that bad boy into. And then when you get it singing, then someone says, oh yeah, now you need to learn about compression because you've got to get compression because otherwise you're going to get this kind of, this sort of like divide between a kick drum hitting on the same tone as the bass frequency. So it became like an apprenticeship. If you wanted to get into making electronic music, you were going to have to put in some hours, some serious hours and some serious wonga to get the gear. Which
it does make you think, like, how people who are sort of coming across plugins first, what is it? It must be really alien to them because they don't know that there was a box with actual knobs on it like this. Yeah. And now it's a sort of virtual world where everything's being emulated.
Definitely.
Coming to it that way must be really
Yeah,
weird.
and I was going to say one of the things when you pulled that little beauty out of that box was that how weird is it now? How many of these software companies are all making physical modulation boxes for their plugins? So you got the Korg. Haven't Korg brought out like an NS10 with a miniature version with the keyboard and everything with all the dials on it? And now
I think it's really mad that Novation have brought out a hardware controller for an iPad.
Have they really?
Yeah, it's kind of buttons that you can use to play your iPad, which is a bit weird.
It goes full circle, doesn't it? Because the other problem, of course, with old analog gear was that you couldn't save anything on it. There was no memory. They started to bring memory with batteries into it after a fashion. But now, of course, with the plugins, you can just, how many presets can you have? It's like hundreds and hundreds. Whereas before, if there's that 101, it's like, well, it's only going to make that one sound it's doing now where you've got those dials. If you change it, that's gone.
And a 101 is just hardly any options
Yeah.
compared to some of the synths, which are just like half a wall.
Yeah.
And look like a telephone exchange.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Things to plug in.
So moving round, what could you never be bear to be parted from?
The thing is that I sort of think of myself first and foremost as a songwriter, and I have to be honest with you, I don't get attached to gear at all. And I've had lots of things that I've been attached to for a few weeks or whatever, but I see them as tools and things for the moment, and I think I get excited about what they can do, not about the thing itself. So, when I was younger, when I first got my first drum machine, that was exciting. But then when I discovered programming on the laptop, that became exciting. Now at the moment, I'm really into sampling. Like just yesterday I was sampling a tuning fork and turning it into a piano sound and all kind of that kind of stuff. But for example, like when I play live, I use a Squier bass guitar because it sounds good, and actually I couldn't care less if there are £2,000 bass guitars that, it's just a bass guitar, and so it's the song that you make, it's the sound that you can create, it's your ideas. I'm not that attached to bits of gear. Apart from I've got an old Technics piano from the 90s which I use. I just go and sit down at it because it's just on and off, and for creating ideas sometimes just having on and off is good because you don't want to spend all day getting the right sound when you're trying to get the right chords. That's probably it.
Can I borrow?
So there is one. Anything that you can't bear to lose.
Focusrite by any chance?
Both really. I've got an endless supply of that, man. We've got two really good answers there. Two really different answers, but two really good answers. Something that Rob said a minute ago is interesting, that these days it's more, I've been collaborating with someone recently on a project because when I introduced myself, I spoke about how I'm a songwriter as well, and that now I'm producing dance music, and it's like a whole different learning curve that I've embarked on, and now I'm years into this. I want to get some sort of fulfillment or success from this, and it is really a very different thing, but you always have to go back to the roots of songwriting to actually make the music part work as well. You can't just produce a good beat and have a song. They're two sort of separate entities. Exactly. But these days it's more about, mate, have you got this plugin, have you got that plugin, because otherwise the project that you share won't open up on their computer. So it's instead of no one's asked me if they can borrow my hardware synths, because it's more about, have you got this plugin so that the project opens. But yeah, going back to the question, like the thing I wouldn't lend to people is even though I'm now really passionate about my dance music production, it's my guitars that I wouldn't let out the house. That's it, straight up.
Cool. I'd like to say the same as Phil, but I think it'd be my 4-track, the one that I was talking about earlier, because to me technology is like a double-edged sword. The more technology you have, it seems like the more restricted you are, because the more options you have. So if you have a million different options, you have a million different ways to procrastinate when you're trying to write. But my 4-track, well, it's a 3-track now because one channel's broken. It's just literally...
Right, they're rare, those 3
you
tracks.
can record 3 different things with no options, no compression, minimal EQ. It's just turn it up or down. And I think I was most prolific when I was a sort of naive, stoned 18-year-old with a 4-track. And now that I've got a whole world of studio technology, I will spend 10 hours on a bass line or side chaining a bass line to a bass drum. And then you get lost down this sort of rabbit warren and forget that there's meant to be a song underneath it.
But did you get into bouncing? Because one of the crazy things with 4 tracks is that
I can't bounce now.
Because you could record on 3 tracks and then do a mix onto track 4, and then you could sort of go on forever, and it would get lower and lower quality.
Well, that's what Mike Oldfield did with Tubular Bells until the original tracks disappeared.
But that was amazing. It's a real kind of discipline that. And actually lots of big record producers commit to things, and lots of beginners will have 200 tracks on their on their thing.
Well, we made a rule on our last album to try and write everything with 8 tracks or bounce down to a track, so we'd have drums on a stereo track, just to take away all the options.
I remember seeing a thing that Flying Lotus had been asked to remix Radiohead, and he was like, I can't do it. Well, how could I do this? Because the piano and the vocal are on the same track, and that's because Radiohead will record the piano and the vocal, and they'll just say, well, they work together, so we'll just print that as a stereo mix, and they don't keep it for later. So if they want to turn the vocal up, and whereas loads of people, and with computers especially, you get onto this whole, until your computer crashes, basically, you keep adding plugins. And there's another guy, one of the world's most famous sort of mix engineers, Chris Lord, is it Alge or Alge or something?
Yeah.
He does all this sort of big American FM rock kind of stuff, and he uses and one of the things he mixed was My Chemical Romance, Black Parade. Not that this is a favourite tune of mine, but it's a good example because it had 90 guitar tracks or something. But he submixes everything onto this old digital multitrack, which has only got 24 tracks. So if he's got 8 rhythm guitars, he'll just put stereo rhythm guitars or mono rhythm guitar or whatever, and then a mix using that. And that was one of the great things about the 4-track, is you had to get it right when you did your little bounce.
I've been trying to get into that more, of like printing a song in its really early form as a stereo track, and then building on top of it like a painting. So you have like a vague track, and then you'll keep adding stuff to it. But you need to get that track right in the first place, and that's the hard bit.
Working with these Indian drummers, and they did a track where they recorded Billy Cobham playing drums, and then brought it into mix, and then add more drums on.
Yeah.
And when it arrived, just as the drums, it was 96 tracks, 96 stereo tracks of drums from real world studios, and they've never done anything with it. It's just too big. There's too much of it. So it's there's just too much to work with.
Who was it who mixed Siamese Dream?
Did he mix those?
No, it was Flood, wasn't it? Was it Flood? Anyway, it was like a really expensive LA recording with loads and loads of room mics and stuff, and he just took all of them out, so everything's close mic'd, and it's like down to about 12 tracks, and that's why that album sounds so in your face and urgent, I think.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen the Dave Grohl keynote, he was the keynote speaker at this year's South by Southwest in Texas. It was a big music exhibition, and he did a talk, and he showed how he used to make music in his bedroom, and it was with 2 multi-trackers. So you record, take the tape out, put it in the next one, and do an overdub, and then he actually demoed that in his talk. So if you haven't seen it, it's quite an interesting talk.
Right?
Sorry,
this is on the film, or like you're saying on the internet, or what?
It should be on the internet. If you Google Dave Grohl keynote speaker SXSW South by Southwest, and it's a good talk.
Probably the sort of purest, most direct version of that I saw was there's another film, with it's got Jack White in it. It's also got.
It might get loud.
Yeah. And in that, he plugs the mic into a tape recorder. Yeah. Writes the song, records it, and then takes the tape out. It's like, there it is, done. Yeah. And there's something good about that.
There's a whole bit about Jimmy Page with Led Zeppelin in there. And when I was saying earlier about how when I first started buying gear, and it's like you met someone that had a sampler or compressors and effects boxes and stuff. For anyone that's suddenly coming into it with just software and a laptop, they might suddenly hear someone like me saying about that and think, oh God, maybe I need to go and get hardware then to understand it. But hey, in that documentary, Led Zeppelin were putting a drummer in a bathroom in a mansion house to get the reverb, because there were no reverb boxes. So he would probably say to someone in the 1980s when like quadriverbs were coming out and stuff, oh, you're so lucky, you just got a box you can plug your guitar in, it sounds like you're in a freaking stadium. We had to put it in a bloody mansion house to get that reverb sound in a bathroom. So it just it goes down the line, doesn't it?
One of the things that you were saying about worrying about sounds and everything, I just wonder if that's partly down to the fact that as the music industry gets smaller and smaller, people are now doing multiple jobs. And I was it was an interesting thing, I was watching another documentary. This is about Michael Jackson's Bad album. It was like 25th anniversary. And there's a bit, and like just the song Man in the Mirror, I think is a good example, because there's one guy who writes the melody, one woman who writes the lyrics, there's an engineer and all the other engineers. There's a producer who doesn't touch the console. He sits there and says, we need more of this, we need to get a choir in here, there's an amazing singer, there's a guy who comes and mixes it, and it's a team of like 20 people. It's not, and then nowadays we're all doing it all ourselves, so we're starting to write the song and thinking, but for the mix we should turn the bass up a bit. You know, you don't have that
I'll
freedom
switch
of
in the
just
Michael
writing a
Jackson
song.
plug-in to get that Michael Jackson sound. And like you know, with the Might Get Loud documentary, that whole thing about the Levy Breaks drums and recording it in the stairwell,
That's right. Yeah.
and that's a plug-in in Logic now. Yeah, if you look in, you know, in Sound Designer, if you look for stairwell.
Oh, is it? I might download that.
Yeah. I swear it's just
That's the thing. You can download rooms now with convolution reverb. You can download your favourite studio, and you can record a guitar or drums, and then place it inside that room, and it will sound like it's roughly from that studio. So I want that stairwell.
Just like to know, you know, we're going to kind of get into a bit of nitty gritty about the stuff that we use. What is your kind of go-to thing that you just use all the time? What stuff? For me, at the moment, it's well, not at the moment, forever. Since it's been out, it's been Native Instrument Battery. That's just like the thing I always use all the time. But I'd be interested to know.
I guess. Hello. For me,
we are all on.
yeah. It'd be Cubase, just because for me using Cubase is just like using Google. It's just I understand how it works and it's really easy. But in terms of sort of more techie plugins and stuff, I'm really in love with Altiverb at the moment, and I use it on everything. I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah.
Good to know.
I was FL Studio for a very, very long time, which used to be Fruity Loops. I think I had to stop calling it that because I think Kellogg's had Fruity Loops in America or something. I'm not sure, but anyway.
Or it just wasn't PC enough.
But it was because it was so much more speedy for getting a 4/4 rhythm going. You know, just a real quick look. You didn't have to like have I need to get in a plug-in, or I need to bring in a drum machine or a sampler. It was just like straight away. There's your drums, there's your snares, hats. You can get on the get-go really quick. But as soon as we then started to get more involved in like kind of songwriting, it was a bit like, oh, this is falling on its arse. You need something like Cubase or Logic or whatnot. But again, like you were saying, they're just tools. They're just ways of getting stuff up and running pretty quick. So yeah, now I think my go-to tool though is probably the GeForce plugins. So the Mini Monster, the ARP Oddity, just because. Although I was kind of contradicting myself saying that no one can emulate a 101, those analog synths that those boys come up with are just proper.
The Antares ones are good as well. CS80.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guy who makes those plugins lives in Caversham. Yeah.
He does, yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I'm a Logic person. I think what I like about Logic is that everything is kind of included. You don't have to worry about going and getting extra. You can start. You've got every instrument, every effect you could possibly want. The thing I use the most in it is the sampler, because as I mentioned earlier, I like to make my own instruments out of things. So, you know, sampling the open notes of a violin and then turning that into a keyboard, tuning forks, humming a note and sampling it. And I also use it for live a lot because it allows me to, if I go to a studio where I use a Jupiter 4 or something, you know, like an ultra rare keyboard that A, I can't afford, and B, would break if you took it on the road. I can sample it from the record, like note by note, and then play it live and have it sound the same as it did on the record. So I'm into the sampler for that. It's just simple. You just sort of put it on there and drag it where you want it to go. So.
As Does It Offend You? Yeah, we'd be doing that as well. We'd sample everything and run everything in Ableton. So we wouldn't be using any soft synths at all, really, just all samplers.
I think it's a bit more reliable as well. I don't know.
Yeah,
I get the impression that if you use a soft synth live, then you just never know what might happen. Especially if it's one with like lots of nice colours and knobs and stuff on it, because they're the ones that always break.
Yeah.
For me, Ableton Live as a DAW, definitely, is my DAW of choice. DAW being not the door we open and go through, but the digital audio workstation is what a DAW is. And plugin wise, really love the Tone. There's a company called Tone 2 that make plugins, and one's called Gladiator. There's one called there's I forget the names. There's a whole world of plugins out there, but the other ones, FabFilter, are my go-tos for effects processing. Not too sort of CPU intensive, but you know, nice graphics, easy to use. Some of the effects trick stuff is really, really good fun to use.